first item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting of the 7th of March 2013. Are the minutes agreed? Agreed. Matters arising from the minutes. At last week's meeting, because of a vote called in the Dáil, we've come to the end of the meeting. We were unable to dispose of the business of that day. So is it now agreed that the committee dispose of vote 6 and chapters 1, 2, 3 and 5, which were the subject of last week's agenda?
Agreed. Chairman, the finance accounts.
As well.
Okay.
So all of that, including the finance accounts, agreed. Item 3 then is correspondence received since our meeting on the 7th of March. 3A, correspondence from accounting officers and ministers. 3A1, correspondence dated 6th of March 2013 from Ms Josephine Feely, Chairperson of the Revenue Commissioners, providing information at her meeting on 21st of February 2010 to be noted and published. 3B is individual correspondence dated 12th of March 2013 from Mr Brian Purcell, Secretary General, Department of Justice and Equality, re-our meeting on 21st of March 2013 to be noted. 3B2, correspondence dated 13th of March 2013 from Ms Eileen Creedon, Chief State Solicitor, re-our meeting on 21st of March 2013, this to be noted also. These two items will be taken together at a later point in the agenda when we go into private session to take some legal advice on the documents we've received. 3C, documents relating to the committee meeting 14th of March 2013. 3C1, correspondence dated 7th of March 2013 from Niamh O'Donoghue, Secretary General, Department of Social Protection. Briefing papers for today's meeting. These to be noted and published. 3C2, correspondence dated 11th of March 2013 from Niamh O'Donoghue, Secretary General, Department of Social Protection. Read the opening statement to be noted and published. Reports and statements received since our last meeting. 4.1, Private Residential Tenancy Board, their accounts for 2011. Clear audit opinion, attention is drawn to the certificate to recognition of deferred payment funding asset, detecting an issue. 5 then is the work programme. On screen now, the work programme which is outlined there. Members will recall that we agreed to invite the local government auditor to meet us in the context of trying to increase accountability for exchequer funding that is allocated to bodies that are not audited by the CNAG, and that meeting will take place in private session at 4:30 on Wednesday the 27th of March 2013. The meeting will be attended by officials of the Department of the Environment, Community and Local Government and the CNAG. So we'll get an opportunity to exchange views.
Yeah. The Director of Audit.
We'll get the opportunity to discuss with them those details, and it's on the Wednesday at 4:30. Item 6 then, draft report on Irish aid. No amendments have been proposed to the draft, so we'll proceed to publish that report next week, Thursday. Is that okay? Agreed. Item 7, any other business? There's no other business, then can we agree the agenda for Thursday the 21st of March at 10 o'clock, where we'll meet with the Department of Justice, Equality and the Office of Chief State Solicitor. The agenda for the meeting will consist of the 2011 annual report of the CNAG and the appropriation accounts, vote 13, Office of the Chief State Solicitor, vote 19, Justice and Equality, and chapter 15, lease of accommodation for probation service project. In dealing with this, we need to take into account some legal advice on the correspondence that we've received. So I would suggest that we go into private session while we take that advice. Is that agreed?
Sure.
just wait till we're in.
We're now back in public session. Deputy Donoghue.
On a related topic,
Yes.
just on a related topic, which is the status of our investigation into Dublin Docklands Development Authority, which relates to the discussion we've just had. Our previous inquiry and committee hearing into this was paused due to a court case that was taking place at that point. Now, my understanding, and perhaps the clerk can confirm this, is that the court case that was in question at the time is now no longer taking place. And if that is the case, then does that give our committee the ability to continue our work in relation to this hugely important topic?
Yeah, well, members will recall that we postponed our hearings into the Dublin Docklands Development Authority in July last year, given the fact, as Deputy Donoghue has said, legal proceedings had been initiated against DDDA by Donatex Limited and Bernard McNamara. At the time, the PSC was advised that there was a risk that ongoing examination could encroach into the work of the courts and could damage the ability of a state body to defend the case. That case has now been dealt with, and the committee can resume its consideration of the CNAG's report. So, in relation to that, I would suggest that the Dublin Docklands Development Authority was firstly asked for certain information at the PSC meeting on the 14th of June 2012, and this information should now be requested again, and they should be asked to supply it to the committee. In July last year, the PSC agreed to postpone its meeting scheduled for 12th of July, at which it would examine the Department oversight of the DDDA, and we should now reschedule that meeting with the Department of the Environment and with officials from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. The latter in respect of the increase in the borrowing limit of the DDDA, which was sanctioned by the then Department of Finance. 3. We had agreed to take evidence from the former chairman of the DDDA, Ms Niamh Brennan, who was appointed after the events covered by the CNAG report, as a number of changes were made by Ms Brennan at the DDDA arising from events that are again covered in the CNAG report. We also agreed that the current executive attend all future meetings of the PSC, and we may return to the issue covered on the 14th, especially where the witnesses felt that the threat of court action prevented them for giving evidence that could have been the subject of that court action. There are a number of other potential witnesses which we can invite to assist the committee in its examination of this issue, and members referred to these at our meeting on the 14th of June 2012, including the individuals who held key posts in the executive, and also the individuals who were on the board of the DDDA during that period, again covered by the CNAG's report. We can review the situation when we have examined the departmental oversight issues, which will be put to PSC examination back on, which will put our examination back on track. So we can take all of those steps immediately now that the threat of court action has been lifted. So with the agreement of members, we'll ask the clerk to I suppose go through the transcripts of those last meetings and to compile the various requests that we now need to make of the parties involved and begin the process of having those hearings. Is that agreed? Agreed. One other matter which we dealt with some back in February, I think, was the question of Waterworld, when we sent letters to, again, various parties linked to that particular issue, and we haven't received a reply yet, so we'll ask the clerk to issue a reminder to the people or to the agencies that we wrote to ensure that that matter is dealt with fully. If we've agreed to that, we'll now move on to the agenda and ask the witnesses to be called, please. The 2011 appropriation accounts and annual report of the CNAG, Vote 38, Social Protection, Chapter 21, Expenditure on Welfare and Employment Schemes, Chapter 22, Welfare Overpayment Debts, Chapter 23, Regularity of Social Welfare Payments, Social Insurance Fund Annual Accounts 2011. Before we begin our meeting, can I remind witnesses, members and those in the public gallery to turn off your mobile phones as they affect the quality of the transmission of the meeting. I want to advise witnesses that you are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give this committee. If you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect of where possible. You should not criticise nor make charges against a member of either House, a person outside the House, nor an official by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. Members are reminded of the provision under Standing Order 163 that the committee should also refrain from inquiring into the merits of a policy or policy of the government or a minister of the government or the merits of objectives of such policies. I want to welcome Ms Niamh O'Donoghue, Secretary General, Department of Social Protection, and to ask you to introduce your officials, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, on my far right, John Conlon, Assistant Secretary in the Department responsible for the Finance area. Sean Riley, who is the Principal Officer in our Finance Unit. On my left, Anne Vaughan, Deputy Secretary of the Department. Kathleen Stack, Assistant Secretary in charge of our Control and one of our regionals. And that's it.
Public Expenditure.
David Maloney from the Department of Public Expenditure.
You're all very welcome. And I ask the CNAG to introduce the accounts, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Social welfare expenditure arises on Vote 38 and through the Social Insurance Fund, and there are inter-account transactions between the vote and the fund. Consequently, Chapter 21 was compiled to present a consolidated view of the expenditure on welfare and employment schemes. Expenditure on welfare schemes in 2011 was just over €20 billion, which was 3% below the peak figure reached in 2009. Trends on some of the key categories of welfare expenditure have been more volatile. In particular, support for people in the labour market more than doubled over a 3-year period to reach €5.8 billion in 2010, but then fell by more than 7% in 2011. This reflects the substantial movements in the live register figures in recent years, transfers of claimants between job seeker benefit and job seeker allowance as benefit entitlements ran out, and payment rate changes. Expenditure on employment schemes amounted to almost €1 billion in 2011. The main income source for the fund is pay-related social insurance contributions, which are collected by the Revenue Commissioners and remitted to the fund. The fund's resources are used to pay for a range of social insurance payments, including pensions, job seekers benefit and illness benefit. At the end of 2007, the fund had accumulated reserves of €3.6 billion, arising from surpluses over many years. However, due to consecutive deficits each year from 2008, those reserves were exhausted during 2010. The Exchequer has been meeting the shortfall since then. For 2011, the Exchequer subvention to the fund was almost €1.5 billion. This was a charge on Vote 38. By law, an actuarial review of the financial condition of the Social Insurance Fund must be carried out at least every 5 years. A review commissioned by the Department, taking end 2010 as a baseline, projected that the current shortfall between receipts and expenditure will grow substantially over the long term. It projected that the deficit on the fund will double to €3 billion by 2019 and will have increased to €26 billion a year by 2066. The actuarial review was necessarily based on a set of assumptions about uncertain future events and conditions. For example, the review assumed on a base case that real earnings will grow by 1.5% a year or more over the projection period. Analysis of the sensitivity of the projections to alternative assumptions indicates that if real earnings grow by just 1% a year, which is a significant growth rate over the 50 to 60-year horizon of the projection, then the projected deficit in 2066 would be €16 billion rather than the €26 billion deficit under the base case. Another critical factor relates to assumed further substantial improvements in life expectancy. when lower rates of expected improvement from the European Commission's 2012 ageing report are used in the projections, the deficit for 2066 is projected at 21 billion euros rather than the baseline 26 billion euros. Now, given the importance of these actuarial projections for decision-making about pensions policy, I recommended that the basis for the key assumption rates in the baseline should be subject to more detailed analysis and testing, including scenario testing, where a number of assumptions are changed together in a consistent way. Chapter 22 reviews the Department's management of recorded welfare overpayment debts. The total value of recorded overpayment debts at the end of 2011 was 343 million euros. Debt recovery during the year increased by half to 52 million euros, but this was more than offset by the value of new overpayment debts recorded, which came to 92 million euros. Debts to the value of 12 million euros were either cancelled or written off during the year. The net result was an increase in 2011 of 28 million euros in total recorded debt for recovery. The results of audit fieldwork indicated that the Department's guidance about procedures for debt recovery was not being applied consistently in local welfare offices. It was recommended that the Department should develop procedures to monitor more closely the proportion of debt recovery plans in place and to assess the performance of local offices in terms of debt recovery rates and rates of referral of appropriate cases to the Department's Central Debt Management Unit. The examination also found that while there is an approval procedure in place for cancellation and write-off of debts, such decisions are not subject to review by management. The chapter recommended that the Department should examine the current arrangements with a view to implementing a consistent approach across all offices, including, at a minimum, a standard form to record the background and reason for all decisions to cancel or to write off overpayment debts. The Department included a review of the Department's overpayment debt management system. We found that the system lacked a number of the features required to be, in effect, debt management tool. In particular, the system was not capable of performing analysis or of producing management information with an appropriate level of detail. It also does not enable the recording of recovery actions taken or pending in respect of individual cases. The proportion of fraud cases prosecuted is typically below 3%. The accounting officer stated that prosecutions are taken only in the more serious cases where there is strong evidence of fraud. Chapter 23 deals with the regularity of social welfare payments, that is, whether recipients were properly entitled to the amounts they received or have received payments in excess of their entitlements. Detection and recording of overpayments is evidence that payments in excess of entitlements occur, but the Department does not record an overpayment in all cases detected. Based on the available evidence, I consider that there is a material level of expenditure on the vote that does not meet the regularity test. The Department carries out periodic fraud and error surveys based on a random sample of scheme cases to assess the risk of excess payments on individual welfare schemes and the likely causative factors. The results of the fraud and error surveys indicate that there is a significant level of underlying irregular payment on certain vote-funded schemes. The more recent survey reports include estimates of the net financial loss to the Department, which tends to be a lower figure than the scheme losses. This occurs because claimants found to be in receipt of an excess payment may be eligible for a payment under a different scheme or may become a dependent of another claimant. Even taking this into account, the estimated levels of financial loss borne on the vote appear to be significant, including 4.1% of expenditure on disability allowance and 2.7% on one-parent family payments. Given the lack of survey coverage for some major expenditure schemes, I recommended that the Department should design a programme of surveys based on the level of annual scheme expenditure, with the large schemes to be reviewed on a continuous basis, mid-sized schemes on a cyclical basis, and small schemes to be surveyed occasionally or not at all. In conclusion, I consider that fraud and error surveys are an important tool in combating losses due to irregular welfare payments. The Department needs a reliable estimate of the overall incidence of excess payments across schemes. This would allow it to assess whether the targeted control activity it undertakes is on a sufficient scale and is effective in detecting excess payments. Ultimately, unless there is a combination of a high probability of detection, followed by prompt recovery of payments in excess of entitlements. Persons tempted to submit false claims for welfare benefits are unlikely to be deterred from doing so. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Have your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to make a brief opening statement this morning. As well as examining the appropriation account for the Department of Social Protection and the Social Insurance Fund statutory account for 2011, I understand that the committee wishes to examine 3 of the 4 chapters relevant to the department that were in the Controller and Auditor General's annual report for 2011. As requested last week, I provided the committee with an update on the conclusions contained in the 3 chapters, together with expenditure data from 2011 to date. I've also provided the committee with 3 separate reports on our implementation of the Fraud Initiative 2011 to 2013, the Non-Compliance Analytics pilot project undertaken with Accenture Consultants, and the recently completed Child Benefit Fraud and Error Survey. As Chapter 21 of the Controller's annual report confirms, the Department of Social Protection spent almost £21 billion on welfare and employment schemes in 2011. As the committee will see from the material I have provided, the provisional outturn figure for 2012 is £20.7 billion. I and my colleagues in the department are very aware of the responsibility we carry in ensuring the proper disbursement of such a significant proportion of government income and expenditure. The department has 3 main functions, namely the delivery of income support, activation, and control of fraud and abuse, and in my view, it must maintain a balance between these in the conduct of its overall business. I'd like to take the opportunity to comment briefly on each. Delivery of income support was the traditional role of the department and is still a vital one. It involves payments to some 2.2 million citizens, comprising approximately 1.4 million weekly and 600,000 monthly payments. We strive to make all these payments in a timely way, as delays can cause hardship and unnecessary concerns for vulnerable people. While the vast majority of claims and payments are processed on time, there are backlogs in certain schemes, as we discussed last year. I can now report that good progress is being made and that the backlogs will have been almost eliminated in the case of invalidity pension and will be eliminated by end March for family income supplement and carers allowance and by end June for disability allowance. In the Social Welfare Appeals Office, the Chief Appeals Officer has also made significant progress, and the number of appeals to be finalised through her office will be increased substantially again this year. It should be noted that the elimination of backlogs in scheme areas will also have a positive knock-on impact on processing times in the Appeals Office. Activation and intro. Pathways to Work provided for the establishment of an integrated employment and income support service. The integration of 3 previously separate services, DSP, FOSS, and the CWS, is in line with international best practice. This new service model includes the provision of an integrated service centre, INTRO, a single point of contact for clients where they can come for benefit and employment services. The profiling of clients to help develop an individual progression plan, a pathway back to employment. A group engagement process in which clients with similar profiles receive a briefing on the options and supports available to them. A follow-up series of one-to-one meetings between clients and employment advisors. Closer engagement between department local offices and their corresponding vocational education or skills training agency to improve the planning and scheduling of courses for unemployed people. Formalisation of the concept of rights and responsibilities in a social contract, a record of mutual commitments. More intensive engagement with employers in order to encourage and facilitate the recruitment of people from the live register. This is a vital part of the new service, and there's been some good progress to date. And finally, greater targeting of activation places for long-term unemployed. We have a demanding and challenging schedule of change, with Intro rolled out to 10 offices last year and a target of another 33 this year, with full completion by end 2014. I can assure the committee that the department, with the assistance of other agencies, will be doing its best to make this happen. Control of fraud and abuse. I've provided material and reports in this regard. I will just say that while the majority of people in receipt of social welfare payments are entitled to these, there is an onus on the Department to ensure that abuse is minimised and that resources are targeted at those who have an entitlement. We are examining ways of using data and information in a smarter way, as set out in the material we sent the committee, while of course always being conscious of the requirements of data protection. Debt management. The Controller made 4 recommendations in his chapter on welfare overpayments, and in my update to the committee I have reported progress on all of them. Section 13 of the Social Welfare Act 2012 allows for deduction of an amount up to 15% of the weekly personal rate payable to customers for the purpose of recovering an overpayment. This equates to €28 per week in the case of customers receiving a weekly payment of €188. This is a significant advancement, as previously we could deduct no more than €2 in many instances. Finally, our Governance Committee has approved the introduction of a new debt management system for the Department, which will be tendered for later this year. The recommendations of the Controller and his team will be incorporated into the specifications for the new system. We are continuing to develop our computer systems, which reliably deliver 87 million payments per year. Although developed independently, mechanisms exist on our major systems whereby significant changes made to customer or claim details are automatically notified to other relevant systems. The Department is working towards consolidation on a single ICT platform, the Business Object Model Implementation, or known as BOMI. This work is being carried out as part of the Department's continuous service delivery modernisation programme. As this programme progresses, all of the Department's client and claim-related systems will be integrated on the one platform, ensuring that all client and claim information is fully and automatically available across all of the Department's schemes and places of business. In conclusion, as a Department, we have completed our first year as a restructured and transformed DSP organisation, with colleagues from a number of different organisations bringing their unique insights and experiences to work. In this regard, the committee may wish to note that some 3,000 new people have joined the Department since 2009, which, while challenging from a HR, culture and training perspective, represents a huge opportunity for us in terms of different talents and skill sets. While adapting to and meeting all the challenges, we will remain focused on our 3 core objects of providing income support, particularly to those most in need, providing activation and employment supports, and ensuring our controls minimise incidents of fraud and error. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we publish your statement? Deputy Sean Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms Donoghue and colleagues are very welcome here today, and thank you for the opening statement. We had a glance at it last night, so I just want to deal with a couple of specific aspects in the Department and in your budget for the years we're discussing. First issue I want to deal with, and probably most relevant to a lot of people today in light of government announcements yesterday, and that's the issue of mortgage interest supplement. As you're aware, 94,000 people are in mortgage arrears for over 90 days. 150,000 people in total are in mortgage arrears to some extent. That figure has doubled in the last 2 years, the numbers in mortgage arrears. Your department, as far as I can see, is the only direct line department that helps people with mortgage difficulties through the mortgage interest supplement. So I understand the estimate for your department for mortgage interest supplement payments in 2011 was 77,246,000, the year under review. I understand that your estimate for that heading today is 41,820,000 for 2013. That is a reduction of 46%. Overall, I think your budget this year for 2013, your estimate on the draft estimates that were published on Budget Day, the revised estimates that you'll be publishing in next Thursday, the 21st, I think they're to be published, is indicating a reduction of in your department's budget of about 2%, approximately, I think. And they can correct that. But what I don't understand is why you have a 25% cut in mortgage interest supplement payments this year alone, on top of the cuts the previous year, and almost 50% cut in that heading, in the one area that the whole of government has said it is its number one priority. Like, you might tell me the role of your department in relation to yesterday's announcement. I know there's a big announcement by regulators and ministers, and that's fine. But the specifics of what the government is actually... Yesterday was all about the government saying, people saying what they're saying. Today we're going to look at, is the government doing anything about what it's actually saying? And the only tangible issue that I can see in relation to the government and your department when it comes to people in mortgages or arrears is a massive cut in the payment. You might talk to me about, you made major changes in the social welfare bill last year to people's eligibility to get mortgage interest supplement. So you might talk to me about the number of people in 2011 that were in receipt of the mortgage interest supplement, because that's the year we're looking at, the numbers currently in receipt of mortgage interest supplement, and more importantly, how many new people have been put on mortgage interest supplement payment since the beginning of the year, and especially since last July, since your department made the changes in the social welfare bill. Because it seems to run counter to everything that's been said. We're here trying to help people in mortgages arrears, and yet the one department that has a budget for this is halved its budget in this area in the last 2 years. So you might talk to me and answer those specific questions in relation to the numbers, the amounts, the cuts, the change in the rules, and how difficult it is, and your role with the financial regulator who deals with the same banks to which you provide the mortgage interest supplement to. Outline the discussions you've been holding with the regulator yesterday, specifically in relation to yesterday's announcement, so we can see the overall joined-up approach by government and your role in this. Like, I would have thought that if one area was going to get some relief from a cut in expenditure, it should be people in mortgage interest arrears. It seems... I'll just come back, but I've given you a number of questions there about this specific issue, and I think it's an issue the public will be very concerned about. So you might talk to me about that particular issue.
Okay. Sorry, thanks, Chairman. Deputy, I suppose there's probably two different elements maybe to speak to you about. One is absolutely, you're right, the number of people who are in receipt has reduced, and the budget line has reduced between 2011, 2012 and indeed what is projected for 2013. And there are a number of factors to do with that. Primarily two changes to the way in which the scheme operated. As the Deputy might be aware, there have been a number of different interdepartmental and working groups who have looked at the issue of support in the mortgages area. And directly, we had our own review in 2010. We participated in the Keane review and would have been party to the recommendations from the Keane review. And we would continue to work with the various different interdepartmental groups leading up to yesterday's